To the future. Except it's the past. The future came and went, and we missed it. The magnificent architecture we see throughout our realm, in which the official liars and controllers of our world have termed historicist, neoclassical, renaissance, gothic, and so on, all belong to one whole unified civilization. A civilization so developed, they had harnessed the power of electromagnetism to such a high degree that they not only built these huge structures, but also crafted them with utter finesse and beauty. A celebration of their own technological advance. The structures were designed with the sole intention of harvesting and generating electromagnetic energy and distributing it across the world. Their cities, towns, an entire way of life ran and depended on the use of free, clean, and powerful electromagnetic energy. The energy was harnessed and collected from the ionosphere above our heads through the use of antennas, spires, domes, and towers. All the impossible structures we see today have been repurposed and rebranded by our controllers and the citizens of the 19th century. This is not a church. This is not a mosque. This is not a castle. And this is not a government building. These are generators, powerful and gargantuous. They would collect and generate the electromagnetic energy, which was then stored in huge power stations and distributed and redirected by sophisticated, advanced structures, one of which is a huge electromagnet, or what we've come to know as triumphal arches. The energy was stored in batteries and capacitors, such as towers and obelisks. All cities were constructed across our realm in the form of one big, interconnected power grid, much like a huge computer motherboard. As you know, we live on a flat stationary plane. At the center is a source of magnetism at the North Pole, and directly above this is Polaris, fixed at the central and highest point of a wondrous crystalline dome firmament. Beneath the firmament, different layers of atmosphere exist at different heights. The ionosphere starts at about 30 miles above Earth. It includes the thermosphere and the mesosphere. The ionosphere is an electrical atmosphere that is ionized by the sun's electromagnetism. It also forms the inner edge of the magnetosphere. I know, a lot of big words and abstract concepts, but you are familiar with this process and have been witness to it every day for the entirety of your lives. As you can see, the vials here contain molecular gases that are present in the atmosphere above us. When an electromagnetic source, such as a Tesla coil, is applied within close proximity of these gases, the coil's magnetic field ionizes or charges these gases, and the result is phosphorescent plasma. The gases become colorized. This is why our sky is primarily blue, because the sun's electromagnetic presence ionizes the atmosphere, and the result is colored plasma. When the sun is entering or exiting our region, or what the liars of the world call sunrise and sunset, we see a variety of color gradients due to its distance from the ionosphere above us. When the sun is no longer journeying above our region, the sky loses its color and we can see the stars in the firmament beyond. Although the official scientists designate the ionosphere as an atmospheric layer, it is actually an ethereal layer. Ether is the fabric or element that carries electromagnetism. It connects everything in our realm. It is the fabric that makes the sun and moon and their concentric journey above our disk possible in the first place. Ether is the mysterious fifth element. It connects everything electromagnetically through vibrational energy. It is the glue, the web, the driving force behind absolutely everything. The four other elements, air, fire, water, and earth, only exist because of the ether. They are expressions of ether's vibrations. Cymatics is a good example of ether's presence. The frequencies fed through the Chladni plate make the sand or salt form precise and complex geometric shapes. The higher the frequency, the more complex the geometric pattern. But what is the conduit that takes the frequency's vibrations and allows the sand to take such shape? That is the ether at work. That's why we see fruits and vegetables that closely resemble cymatic patterns. It is the ether at work. All matter is ethereal, and the shape and form of that matter are different expressions of the ether, determined by frequency and vibration. Ether is the bridge between electromagnetic frequency and vibrational energy, and the form of matter itself. You could call it the Holy Spirit of God. The historical and scientific discourse of ether is a deliberately manipulated one. The enemy introduced the truth only to discredit and subsequently bury it. Some of the alleged figures of the past have written on ether. The so-called Aristotle called it the fifth element. James Clerk Maxwell, the so-called father of electromagnetism, spoke of the ether, stating, "In several parts of this treatise, an attempt has been made to explain electromagnetic phenomena by means of mechanical action, transmitted from one body to another by means of a medium occupying the space between them. The undulatory theory of light also assumes the existence of a medium. We have now to show that the properties of the electromagnetic medium are identical with those of the luminiferous medium. The medium he refers to here is the ether." Albert Einstein and others successfully solidified the heliocentric model through fraudulent schools of scientific thought. But even Einstein could not deny the presence of ether. According to the general theory of relativity, space is endowed with physical qualities. In this sense, therefore, there exists an ether. According to the general theory of relativity, space without ether is unthinkable. For in such space there would not only be no propagation of light, but also no possibility of existence for the standards of space and time, measuring rods and clocks, nor therefore any space-time intervals in the physical sense. Even contemporary scientists, under the spell of heliocentrism, admit it is nonsensical to deny ether's existence. Today, the vacuum is recognized as a rich physical medium. A general theory of the vacuum is thus a theory of everything, a universal theory. It would be appropriate to call the vacuum ether once again. Returning to the ethereal ionosphere. As I said, this layer of ether above our heads is a constant sea of electromagnetism, and is responsible for the colored plasma above that we call the sky. The source of its electromagnetism is the sun. It is because of this ionized layer that we get ionospheric lightning in the form of sprites, which in turn influence the thunderstorms below. Our highly developed and sophisticated historical ancestors not only understood the workings of the ionosphere and the ether, but they had developed methods to masterfully harvest it as a fuel to power the entire Earth. And while the exact process by which they were able to extract the ether is deliberately hidden from us and remains unknown, the structural remains that humanity has since repurposed and reused as architecture offer us many clues as to how it all worked. The evidence is everywhere for those with eyes to see, and once you see it, it becomes so glaringly obvious that you'll kick yourself for never noticing in the first place. The matter is very complex, and it would take time to really flesh out. So for now, let's have a closer look at some of these structures, and I will introduce some basic concepts. As we continue our journey, we will explore everything in more detail. We see them everywhere. On top of all these magnificent structures, towers, spires, and pinnacles that rise into piercing antennas. It was through these complex antennas that the ether was harvested. You see, after the Great Reset of the 1800s, The enemy fractured the old world's unified understanding of God and created multiple religions to try and hide God and justify the existence of such grand and beautiful technological structures. And I know this may trigger some people, but stay with me, I will not let you down. But for now, it is critical to understand that a lot of the religious icons that adorn and make up these antennas were never indicators of different religions in the old world, nor were they intended to be. They signaled something else entirely. They are usually made from copper and gold. Both are excellent conductors of electricity. In many of the structures we call cathedrals, the symmetrical spikes on the pinnacles worked in a similar fashion, extracting ether from the ionosphere. Once harvested, the energy would inevitably have been drawn down into the top larger portion of these domed structures. When examining many of the interiors of these domes, we come to realize that they rely heavily on symmetrical ornamentation. This is achieved by indentation or cavities in the masonry. In the world of electromagnetism, a cavity resonator works through symmetry to produce oscillation or vibration of energetic particles. Symmetrical shapes force energetic particles, or ions, to vibrate in a constant manner. Is this why we see perfect symmetrical ornamentation within the ceiling of many domed structures? It no doubt sounds absurd, but the majority of these structures also feature a smaller type of cavity resonator, or what is more appropriately termed cavity magnetrons, that offer some clarity as to the real function of these structures. A cavity magnetron is a high-powered vacuum tube that generates microwaves using the interaction of a stream of ions with a magnetic field while in the cavity resonator. A magnetron operates through a hollowed, symmetrical vacuum. If you break the symmetry or close the vacuum, it no longer functions. But can you see the resemblance? These structures were never intended to hold glass within them. The controllers added the stained glass to the rose windows to shut off the magnetron's function. They closed out instruments of free energy. And they are everywhere in these structures. Interestingly, if you look at the geometry of entire sections of the structures themselves, then it becomes very evident that they functioned in their entirety like a cavity magnetron to generate energy. All cavity magnetrons consist of a central heated circular metal chamber in which the current leaves, and it's called a cathode. Look at that word. Cathode. Does it remind you of another word? Cathedral. Cathode. Like with everything else, they corrupt the truth and hide things in plain sight. The controllers removed most of the cathodes integral to these cavity magnetrons, but there are some structures today in which you can see traces of the old cathodes still present. The heavy reliance on symmetry and cavities within these structures is not coincidental. The symmetrical ornamentation would have worked in a similar manner, causing the energetic particles to vibrate in a constant manner. The flowers within the squares can be understood as similar to acoustic resonators, working to vibrate the ions. It is here that the energy would have been continually manipulated into vibrational and electromagnetic energy of specific frequencies. Really look at these magnificent acoustic resonators. Could you craft one of these by hand today, and at such height? Why would an underdeveloped people spend so much of their time crafting such perfect symmetrical ornamentation? Especially if it had no function and was purely aesthetic. They wouldn't. The cavity resonators and magnetrons would have had to have worked in partnership with a central engine, or reactor, contained within all these structures. Both resonator and reactor are interesting words. Just like the words conductor, generator, creator, and the name Mercator, they all contain the word Tor within their linguistic structure. They hold a linguistic memory and pay homage to the torus or toroidal field. The torus is the flow of electromagnetism. Without this flow of energy, there would be no life on Earth.